Hi, I'm Odessa. My mom said I could either marry the man she picked or disappear from her life, forever. I thought she meant it metaphorically. She didn't. The invitations were already sent. The dress wasn't mine. The groom barely knew me. But the worst part? Everyone in that room knew the truth, except me. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a signature. So I showed up on that aisle, but not for the reason they expected. What did I do when they tried to erase me from my own life? Well, I chose the third option. I woke to the sound of heels against hardwood, sharp, intentional, too early. The light creeping through the plantation shutters told me it wasn't even 7 yet. Charleston in spring could be beautiful, but not in this house. Not when Seraphine's voice floated down the hall like some sour perfume. Today's the fitting, Odessa. Don't make her come get you. I sat up slowly. My feet met the cold floor, and for a second, I wondered if I'd actually frozen overnight. My room had changed since Dad died. Half the books boxed, half the shelves stripped, and a faint lavender smell that wasn't mine. It was Mother's. She'd sprayed her scent through every part of this house as if trying to erase all traces of who I used to be. Downstairs, the kitchen was too quiet, save for the tap of fingernails on glass. Marjorie Vane, my mother, didn't look up when I entered. Her manicured hand pushed a document across the marble island toward me, like it was just another grocery list. But I saw it. My name in block letters. The groom's name I barely recognized. The minister's portion already filled in. Just sign it. We've discussed enough. No, I said before I could soften the word. We haven't. She looked up then, and for a moment I caught a flicker of age beneath the powder. Lines she didn't want me to notice. You can sign, she said, or you can leave. And let's be honest, Odessa, you wouldn't last a week out there. I didn't say anything. That was her favorite game. Lay a trap, then pretend she hadn't said it. Mom? I began, trying again. I don't even know him. Her eyes narrowed. That's irrelevant. He's stable, his family's old money, and you've already wasted enough time playing the martyr. From behind her, Seraphine appeared with something hanging from her arm, a plastic bag from Vickers Cleaners. It was misshapen and slouched like it had been stored too long. I found your dress, she said, not even looking at me. Still fits. Figured I'd save you the hassle. She laid it over the back of a chair and pulled the plastic halfway off. The fabric beneath was champagne lace, creased, with a faint red smudge near the collar. Lipstick. My breath caught. That was the same dress she'd worn during her ill-fated engagement to Mason Klein. I remembered the night it ended. Her crying on the stairs, that same lipstick smeared across her face. Now it was mine, like a hand-me-down humiliation. You don't have to act so shocked, Seraphine said with a shrug. It's still a pretty dress. I swallowed the insult burning on my tongue and reached for the paper instead. But I didn't sign. Not yet. Back upstairs, I stared at the old wallpaper, roses fading into cream. My childhood room didn't feel like mine anymore. Half-empty drawers, cleared corners, and a single suitcase that hadn't been there yesterday. Silent threats. They'd already decided I'd sign. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the papers, my fingers tracing the edge. My college scholarship letter peeked out of a box. 4 years ago, I gave it up when Dad got sick, stayed to care for him while Seraphine flew off to Europe and Mother stayed at the country club. And now they wanted me to play obedient again. I thought, is my silence the currency they keep using? Downstairs again, I found the pen already waiting. Black ink, heavy in my hand. I'll do it, I said, not looking at either of them. Mother raised a brow. Good. You'll thank me one day. No, I said softly, but I'll pretend for now. I signed. Not from surrender, but strategy. There's a difference. Seraphine turned away, satisfied. Mother leaned back, triumphant. I tucked the paper into the folder and stood. If we're done, I'll go try on my dress. I walked back to my room slowly, the dry cleaning bag clutched against me. In front of the mirror, I held the dress up, watched its lace settle like dust on my skin. They think they've seen my surrender, I whispered to my reflection. But I haven't even started showing them what refusal looks like. I didn't rush upstairs. There was no reason to. The dress was still clutched against my body, like a memory I hadn't agreed to carry. I made my way up the creaking staircase of the vain house, each step groaning under the weight of resignation. The hall smelled faintly of lemon polish and wilted roses, the usual scent of forced appearances. When I reached my old bedroom door, I reached for the knob and twisted. Nothing. I tried again. It didn't budge. Behind me, heels tapped the floor with slow, deliberate rhythm. Marjorie didn't pause as she passed, only tilted her chin toward the door. "That room belongs to Seraphine now," she said flatly. "You'll find towels in the guest hallway." No inflection, no apology. Just a transfer of ownership, as if my memories came with a title deed. I let go of the knob, hand tingling from the pressure, then turned and walked. Away from what used to be mine. The guest hallway was a strip of forgotten space behind the laundry room, wedged between the old coat closet and the door to the back patio that no one used. I didn't get a suitcase. I wasn't offered hangers. Just a cardboard box Marjorie had filled with my clothes, folded without care, sleeves tangled, one bra draped awkwardly over the edge like a white flag. The guest bed wasn't a bed. It was a fold-out cot with a metal frame that clicked when I sat down. A blanket was already laid out, more scratch than warmth. The only sounds were the hum of the water heater beside me and the distant clatter of dishes in the kitchen. I sat there, surrounded by boxes and shadows, and for a moment, I wanted to laugh. But it stuck in my throat, brittle and burning. Later that evening, I walked quietly toward the kitchen. My head hurt. I wanted water. Halfway down the hallway, something caught my eye. The photo wall. It had been there since we were kids. Lined with wooden frames in gold and navy. Our milestones, birthdays, first days of school, prom photos, and graduation caps. I stopped walking. Something was missing. My 8th grade piano recital photo. Gone. My high school graduation. Gone. I stepped closer. The arrangement skipped from Colton's 12th birthday to Seraphine's senior prom. My face had been erased. I touched the wall. There were no empty nails, no misaligned spacing. It was as if I'd never existed. A hollow grew behind my ribs. I tried to remind myself that I was real, that I had memories. But the wall disagreed. It whispered, "You were nothing. You are nothing." I went back to the cot. No one had noticed me leave. No one would notice I returned. I pulled out my phone and tried to call Professor Ann, my old mentor. She had once told me, "Odessa, you're too good at holding back. One day, that will be your prison." It rang once, twice, then voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what to say. That I regretted every yes I gave to this family? That I gave up a full ride to Stanford for a father who died 3 months later while Marjorie planned a brunch? No one ever called me a placeholder, but I felt like one, a space filler between Seraphine's glory and Colton's ambitions, a warm body in a cold house. I couldn't cry. Not tonight. Instead, I found a permanent marker in the kitchen drawer, the one where we used to keep coupons and birthday candles. I took it back to the cot. Carefully, I flipped up the metal frame and wrote under the wood slat. Odessa Lenora Ray was here. Not for them, for me. I recapped the marker and stared at the words until they blurred. Then I whispered, "I existed here. I will not be erased again." My phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number? "You're still invited. Bring your smile." No name. just those words. And I knew exactly who it was from. The wedding planner, who was told to send reminders, not reassurances. My hands shook, not from fear, but from something darker, like heat pressing through cracks in cold stone. This wasn't over. I woke before sunrise, the way I used to on school days when Dad and I would make French toast before anyone else stirred. This morning, though, the house was already buzzing. Someone had started coffee, and the faint smell of burned toast clung in the air. I told myself I was getting up early to be helpful, but if I were honest, it was to feel useful again, to feel visible. I stepped into the kitchen and froze. 3 black garbage bags were propped near the back door. I reached for a mug, but something pale and soft caught my eye, poking out of the top of one of the bags like a ghost waving goodbye. My feet moved before my thoughts caught up. I tugged gently, pulling it free. The linen was crumpled, wet, smudged with dark stains that smelled like old coffee and banana peels. My embroidery, the piece I'd made for Seraphine, stitched over 3 months. It had once read, "She who rises remembers where she came from." Now, the edges were frayed and half the letters were obscured. I didn't even remember wrapping it, but I had. I folded it with lavender tissue paper, slid it into the gift pile last week, thinking, maybe foolishly, that some part of her still remembered our childhood. Remembered sitting beside me in that little yellow room, whispering dreams too big for this town. I held the linen in my hands like it was fragile glass. No note, no acknowledgement, just garbage. Later that morning, I kept my head down, offering to help the wedding planner with seating cards. She smiled like I was an enthusiastic intern, not the bride's sister. "You're very sweet," she said, as if I had nothing better to do. Maybe I didn't. After lunch, they gathered everyone in the parlor to preview the wedding video reel. Old home videos had been digitized and edited together with instrumental music and soft transitions. I stood in the back, clutching a glass of water I didn't want, and tried to brace myself for whatever version of history they were about to present. There was Seraphine as a toddler, smashing cake with both fists. Colton learning to ride a bike. Mom and Dad dancing in the kitchen, their hair darker, their smiles wider. But there was no footage of me. Not one clip. No birthday candles, no school plays, no camping trips. Nothing. The montage jumped from Colton at age 5 straight to Seraphine in her ballet recital tutu, like I'd been edited out. I stared at the screen, willing some version of myself to appear. A flash of my face, a voice in the background. A shadow. Anything. "Where did these videos come from?" I asked the planner quietly after it ended. "Oh, your mother sent everything from her archives," she replied, distracted by her clipboard. I didn't say a word. I didn't nod or smile. I just walked away before I said something I'd regret. Back in the guest hallway, my hallway now, I sank to the floor beside the dryer. The tile was cold through my jeans. I stared at the folded blanket that passed for my bed. I didn't cry. Maybe that would have been easier. Instead, I sat still, listening to the hum of the house that no longer had a place for me. "Maybe I never belonged," I whispered. "Not even to memory." The embroidery was still in my coat pocket. I pulled it out and stared at the ruined cloth, the quote now smeared into illegibility. I turned it over and found a corner that was still dry. With a black marker from the pantry, I wrote one sentence on the back. "They can forget me, but I'll leave reminders." I folded it again and slid it back into the pocket. The fabric was cold against my chest, but somehow steadying. Night had fallen by the time I emerged to refill my glass. As I passed the upstairs hallway, Seraphine stepped out from her room, my old room, and looked me up and down. "Don't worry," she said, voice syrupy and cruel. "After next week, you'll have your own place. Far away." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned back inside and closed the door. I stood there for a beat, then walked back to the laundry hall. I sat on the edge of the cot, pulled out Dad's old notebook, the one he'd kept hidden behind the bookshelf in his study. I opened to the first page, the ink faded, but still legible, and I began to read. I hadn't been back inside my father's study in nearly a year. The room had become a catch-all since he passed, with boxes stacked to shoulder height and faint trails of dust on every surface. But I remembered the way it smelled: cedar, paper, and a hint of pipe tobacco he tried to quit but never did. I came searching for old envelopes, something mundane to distract myself. Instead, I found the folio. It was tucked behind a stack of vintage law journals, the kind Dad used to collect even though he never practiced. Leather-bound, worn at the edges. I opened it, expecting documents from the farm or a stack of expired tax forms. What I found instead made my mouth go dry. Legal contracts, land deeds, a full binder of notarized agreements tied to Vane estate parcels. I skimmed past the covers, heart racing. Then I saw it, a transfer of holdings upon marriage agreement, and beneath it, my name. My signature. Except I never signed it. There it was in black ink, Odessa Ray scrawled in a hand that looked almost right, but leaned too heavy on the tail of the Y. I turned the page. Attached was the wedding date, the location, and a clause. Upon legal union, the parcels listed under Vane West would merge under a new family trust. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a merger, a business transaction with flowers and cake. My marriage wasn't about love or even appearances. It was about acreage. I dug deeper into the folio. Tucked inside one of the back sleeves was a printed version of the wedding schedule sent to guests, the one with floral trim and embossed lettering. Page 2 included a line I'd never noticed. Reception hosted at the Westfield Oak Reserve, newly incorporated. That land had always been part of our family's western boundary. Dad used to take me out there every spring to watch the deer. The Westfield Oak Reserve, now part of a registry gift. I dropped the binder like it burned me. My fingers trembled as I reached again, this time pulling out a smaller envelope. My name was written across it in my father's handwriting. His real handwriting, not the forged mess from the contract. I stared at the script for a long moment before I broke the seal. Inside was a letter. Just one page, folded cleanly. Odessa, if your mother has ever used your name to reclaim what was once mine, then this letter finds you at a crossroads. Miriam Choate is the name to remember. She helped me draft the documents your mother never wanted you to see. You have full authority. I revoked any rights Marjorie claimed the moment she tried to barter you for land. I'm sorry you're seeing this now. I wanted better for you. Love, always, Dad. I stood there, breath held, letter clutched like a lifeline. Beneath the page was a certified revocation of power, signed and notarized. It granted me all legal rights to the land. No marriage necessary, no strings. They had planned this, carefully, methodically, for years. I walked outside, past the hall where my face had been wiped clean, and out into the backyard. The old oak tree still stood, its bark carved with initials from years past, Dad's and mine, circled in a heart that time had warped. I sat beneath it, hands still shaking. The letter lay open in my lap. Sunlight filtered through branches, lighting the edge of the page. For a while, I just sat, silent. Not broken, but stretched so thin I could feel the shape of every breath inside my chest. They thought I wouldn't question it, that I'd be so desperate to belong again, I'd sign anything, wear anything, say anything. That night, I didn't skip dinner. I sat at the long table across from my mother. She wore her favorite pearls. Seraphine talked about floral centerpieces like nothing had shifted, but I could feel the letter in my pocket, pressing against my hip like a second spine. I reached for my glass, met my mother's eyes, and said clearly, "If you push this wedding, you'll lose more than land. You'll lose your legacy." She didn't flinch, but her fork paused in midair. Colton glanced up from his plate. No one said a word. Later that night, I found Dad's old Rolodex in the back of his closet. It smelled like dust and time. Under the letter C, I found her. Miriam Choate, Estate Law, Greenville. I dialed. It rang twice, then voicemail. My name is Odessa Ray. My father told me you'd know what to do. End of chapter 4. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I stepped onto Grandfather Boone's porch. The late afternoon sun clung to the edges of the trees, casting long shadows across his modest farmhouse. No one else in the family ever came here unless summoned. I wasn't summoned. He didn't speak when he opened the door, just nodded once, his blue eyes scanning me like he already knew why I was there. Inside, the air was thick with old cedar and something else, dust, or maybe memory. Without a word, he reached into the hall closet, pulled out a wooden box I remembered vaguely from childhood, and handed it to me. It was lighter than it looked. I waited for him to say something, anything, but he just patted my shoulder once and disappeared back down the hallway. I carried the box to my car and drove away in silence, not ready to open it just yet. It wasn't until I reached the overlook by the marsh road that I finally unlatched the lid. Inside, time had folded itself into layers. A baby bracelet with Odessa R. etched into the band, the metal dulled but intact. Faded photographs of me riding my first pony, me nestled against my father's chest by the fireplace, me asleep on the old study couch with a book half open. Beneath it all, tucked into a side panel, was a cassette tape marked in my father's script. For her, when she's ready. My hands trembled as I slid it into the dash player. His voice, warm and slow, came through the speakers. You were never a mistake, baby girl. Don't let anyone trade you for pride. You are the root and the bloom, not some transaction on a ledger. I didn't cry. I just listened. Twice. Then drove toward town, the bracelet now around my wrist. Back in Charleston, I stopped by Lydia Hatch's seamstress shop to fix a torn hem on the wedding dress. She squinted at me over her glasses, then laughed lightly. Funny thing about this dress, it was made for your sister first. I blinked. What? Seraphine. About 3 years ago. She was supposed to marry a man from Atlanta. Big family money. But he called it off. Heard about her little financial dealings. My mouth went dry. And my mother gave it to me? Marjorie didn't want it to go to waste, I suppose. She shrugged. Said it was perfect for the less extravagant daughter. Her words, not mine. When I got home, the family was already gathered for dinner. I didn't speak until dessert was served. I stood slowly, the bracelet peeking from beneath the sleeve of that second-hand gown. Marjorie glanced at me with what she must have thought passed for maternal pride. You look finally presentable, she offered. I met her gaze. You gave me the scraps of a failed bride and dressed it up as duty. I'm not your second-hand salvation. Forks clinked against porcelain. Colton cleared his throat. Seraphine rolled her eyes. If this wedding happens, I said, voice steady as a held match, I promise you, you'll regret what you tried to bury. A beat of silence, then Seraphine's soft, amused chuckle. You've always been dramatic. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out to the front porch, letting the screen door slap behind me. The wind had picked up. I stood there for a long moment, letting the silence settle before the mail slot clicked behind me. A delivery envelope slid in, addressed in sharp, slanted ink. Odessa Ray. I picked it up, opened it with a thumb pressed hard enough to rip the edge. Inside was a printed list of guest names. Beside each one, a column labeled, Assets Released Upon Signing. The morning air on the estate felt foreign, like I had never breathed it before. This house, with its rosewood floors and the faint echo of classical music drifting from the parlor used to feel like my spine. Now it was a ribcage that didn't protect me. I stepped into the grand front hall, where the wedding welcome board leaned proudly near the staircase. The names were gilded, printed in perfect serif font. I scanned the list, and there it was. Odessa Vane. Vane. I blinked, my breath caught. "Excuse me," I said to the young planner, stringing silk ribbons along the banister. "That name, it's misspelled. My name is Odessa Ray Vane." She didn't even glance at it. "We printed it as submitted by the family." I touched the board. The paper felt too thick, like it was meant to last. My name, misspelled, misrepresented, misplaced. It stung deeper than it should have, but I knew better by now. This wasn't a mistake. Outside, laughter erupted from a group of decorators around the back patio. My phone buzzed. An anonymous account had posted a photo of me. I stood bent over a cardboard box, that cursed stained dress clinging awkwardly to my hips. The lighting made me look hollow. The caption read, "Trash Bride Energy." The comments were full of emojis and thinly veiled cruelty. "Is this the real dress rehearsal?" One read. Another, "Who thought that angle was a good idea?" I never posed for that. Someone had taken it without my consent, from inside this house. I turned sharply and walked back toward the foyer, hands clenched. I didn't even knock as I pushed the door open. Seraphine was there, reclined on the velvet love seat, phone in hand. Her thumb slid up the screen slowly, methodically. When our eyes met, she smirked. "You think this is funny?" I said, my voice even, but my chest a war zone. She shrugged. "You said you'd ruin the family, remember? I'm just beating you to it." The laugh that followed was calculated. I stepped forward and slapped the phone from her hand. It hit the floor with a plastic clatter. Gasps erupted behind me. Someone must have followed me in. The wedding planner. A few guests. A decorator holding a spool of ribbon. I turned to face them all. "This wedding is a circus, but I'm not your clown." Silence. Only the air conditioner hummed. I strode to the welcome board, pulled a permanent marker from my bag, I had kept it ever since the embroidery incident, and uncapped it with one hand. Across the printed mistake, I wrote, "Odessa Ray Vane," bold, all caps. Then I walked outside. The sun burned hotter than usual for spring. I got into my car and loaded the last box from the guest room into the trunk. I opened my phone and typed one message. Group text, Ray Vane family. "Keep humiliating me, and I'll show you what I've truly prepared." I pressed send. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Seraphine through the second-story window. She was standing still, arms crossed, watching. Halfway down the road, my phone buzzed again. An email. Subject: "We were told you're just a guest. Please confirm." The rehearsal dinner was already in motion when I pulled into the gravel lot behind Whitmore Manor. Evening light spilled across the estate lawn like it was trying too hard. I stepped out, tugging at the hem of my navy dress, modest and plain, but chosen for dignity. My heels clicked against the stone as I reached the side entrance, the one for staff, apparently. A young woman with a clipboard intercepted me before I made it to the double doors. Her hair was tight in a bun that made her look like she'd never blinked in her life. "You're late," she said, eyeing me like I was a replacement waitress. Before I could speak, she shoved a silver tray into my hands. "Canapés? Start with the east wing." I blinked. "Excuse me, I'm Odessa Ray. I'm supposed to be—" "Yes, we were informed," she said curtly, not looking up. "You're assisting, as per the bride's family." The tray felt colder than it should have in my hands. My mother had decided that I wasn't worthy of being a guest at my own rehearsal dinner. I took a breath, steadied the tray, and stepped into the hall. Not to serve, to see. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above conversations filled with clinking glasses and well-rehearsed laughter. The guests didn't recognize me, or pretended not to, but I recognized the lies in their eyes. A side corridor led to the powder room, but I ducked into the one beside it, where linen carts were stashed. Through the cracked door, I heard Seraphine's voice. She was never the bride, just a formality to claim backland. Poor thing still thinks it's about love. The sound of laughter followed. Male, female, uncaring. Then a toast rang out. To the family that does what needs to be done. My fingers curled around the tray edge until they hurt. I slipped away unnoticed and headed down the service corridor. I knew old estates like this well. There was always a small office wing, often left unguarded at events like these. Sure enough, I found it at the end of a dim hallway. I shut the door behind me and approached the broad walnut desk. A folder lay atop it with a ribbon seal, the kind used in decorative document presentations. I opened it. My name stared back at me. Marriage Registration Certificate. Odessa Ray Vane. Except the signature beneath wasn't mine. It looked almost correct, but I'd never signed anything of the sort. Dated 2 weeks ago. The witness? A name I didn't recognize. No one I'd known. No relative. No friend. My stomach turned. I snapped photos with my phone, front and back. I made sure every detail was legible. Then I slipped out, stepping quietly over polished floors until I reached the main ballroom. The string quartet was playing something cheerful and expensive. A low hum of conversation blanketed the air. I walked calmly toward the podium near the head table. No one noticed at first. Not until I placed the tray on a server's stand and pulled a small USB from my purse. "Excuse me?" I said, not needing to raise my voice. The mic picked me up clearly. Heads turned. "I hope you all enjoy the wedding," I began, pausing just enough to let the room fall into hush. "It's not mine, and apparently, it never was." With a flick, I plugged the USB into the side of the connected laptop. The large screen behind me flickered, then displayed the certificate. My name, a forged signature, a stranger's witness. Whispers erupted, then silence. The kind of silence that exposes everyone. From the corner of my eye, I saw the groom's father stiffen. He stood slowly, said nothing, and exited the hall. A guest spilled their wine trying to follow him. I didn't wait for questions. I didn't need them. I walked out, past the stunned decorator, past the open-mouthed planner, past Seraphine, whose phone was frozen mid-scroll, eyes blinking in disbelief. The night air outside felt like release. I reached my car, closed the door behind me, and sat for a moment in the quiet. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my mother's assistant. "Tomorrow the cake will say her name, not yours." The morning air was already thick with heat as I stood behind the catering truck, eyes fixed on the side gate of Whitmore Manor. The florist, a wiry woman named Claudia, nodded once before slipping me through the service entrance. I handed her the envelope, crisp and folded, no words exchanged. In the mirror of the powder room, I pressed the microphone flat against my skin, just beneath the edge of my collarbone. My fingers trembled as I whispered, "This isn't about revenge. It's about refusing silence." I stepped into the dim hallway. The dress clung to me like a final dare, identical to the decoy bride's. The music began to swell. Strings, polished piano, the kind of music they use to convince people they're walking into fairy tales. From one end of the hall, she appeared, the girl they tried to replace me with. From the other, I moved forward. Gasps broke through the crowd like popcorn on a skillet. The guests froze, phones rose. I held my mother's stare as I passed the second row. Her lips parted, but no words came. At the altar, Caleb shifted, eyes darting between us. The officiant looked as though he might faint. I didn't wait. Tell them, I said quietly, why this wedding matters, why it had to be my name. His face twisted, sweat formed instantly on his temples. Odessa, please, let's not do this here. We're already doing it, so speak. Behind me, the live stream camera light blinked red. He gave in. The crack in his voice spread like a fissure. It was the trust, the inheritance clause. We needed a Boone signature on the license, board rules. My father thought, his voice faltered. They thought you wouldn't ask questions. I turned to the guests. Their perfect pastel hats and ironed suits meant nothing now. You all came for a performance, I said. Let me give you something real. From my purse, I pulled out the folded documents, the forged license, my real birth certificate, a copy of the family trust. I held them up like rotten fruit. This, I said, is what it looks like when a woman stops apologizing. Gasps again. A rustle in the crowd. Somewhere near the back, someone began to cry. I reached up and tore off the veil. It dropped like dead weight. I am not a placeholder. I am not a name you sign away for convenience. I am not your loophole. A sharp thud echoed behind me. Seraphine had collapsed. Marjorie screamed for someone to call security, but no one moved. From the second row, Caleb's grandmother stood slowly. Her voice was barely a whisper, yet somehow carried. Let her speak. She's the only honest one in the room. That broke the dam. The officiant dropped his book. Guests rose, some fleeing, others filming. The live feed continued to roll. I didn't care anymore. I stepped down from the altar, heels abandoned halfway, until my bare feet touched the marble aisle. I walked, past the rows of stunned relatives, past the fake bride who stood frozen in place, past my mother, whose hands shook as she clutched her pearls. Out the grand double doors, into the humid light. The sun was rising, brushing gold over the estate's long driveway. I walked slowly, the dew catching on my soles. A black car pulled up to the curb, quiet and deliberate. The back door opened. A man stepped out, holding a thick folder. My name was scrawled across the label, and just beneath it, a second name I hadn't heard in years. The courthouse steps were still wet from the morning dew, though the sun had already risen high enough to catch on the old bricks like gold. I sat on the bench across from the square, my hands resting on my lap, palms cold despite the humid air. The breeze tasted like sea salt and jasmine. I hadn't slept, not really, but somehow I felt clearer than I had in years. The black car pulled up slow, quiet like it knew the weight of the morning. The man stepped out with a brief nod. No pleasantries, just the envelope. You asked for truth, he said. Even if you weren't ready back then. I took it with steady hands. He turned, got back in, and drove off. No questions, no fanfare. Just closure delivered in a manila folder. I waited a full minute before I even opened it. I could already feel the shape of something heavy. Inside, old letters in looping handwriting I didn't recognize until I did. My father's. Dozens of pages, never sent to me. Some still sealed. Others opened, creased by hands that weren't mine. There was also a court document stamped and notarized. Custody, emancipation. A signature that didn't belong to me, but had been used to sever me legally from my inheritance when I was just 14. My mother's handiwork. Sharp, calculated, cold. Reading it, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow, like the last trick had finally been played, and now there was nothing left to break. I walked toward the river, feet crunching softly over the path. Down by the water, I sat on a weather-worn bench and let the sound of the current pull me somewhere quiet in my mind. Not numb, not angry, just still. Maybe that's what grief looks like when it finally has space, stillness. I didn't just lose a wedding. I lost the idea of family. The fantasy that if I could just be good enough, loyal enough, Quiet enough, they'd let me in. That illusion died somewhere between the fake marriage license and the guest list that called me staff. Sometimes you have to grieve the family you never had, I whispered to the breeze, to find peace in the one you build. Later that afternoon, I found myself sitting across from a lawyer who specialized in estate recovery. She didn't ask many questions, just reviewed the envelope, looked at me carefully, and said, "You've waited long enough. Let's begin." From there, I stopped by an old bakery I remembered from childhood, one with lilac-colored frosting and cinnamon sugar braided into their challah. I used to walk past it every weekend and dream of working behind the counter. I didn't expect anyone to answer the phone when I called. "Come in for a trial shift tomorrow," the woman said. "We could use steady hands." That night, I rented a guest house not far from the water. Just one bedroom, a little porch, and a hammock out back, the kind of place that didn't need defending. No voices telling me who to be, just silence, and my own voice slowly learning to rise above it. Sometime near dusk, I opened my journal again. Not to write another plan, but to write myself back into the world. A voiceover played in my head as I scribbled. "You're never too old to leave the wrong story behind. Some of us were taught that silence was survival, but we know now that speaking is the only way out. You don't need everyone to believe you, just yourself." I paused, listening to the ocean beyond the open window. For once, I didn't need to look over my shoulder. The only thing following me now was peace. At a little cafe the next morning, I set up my laptop and ordered a cappuccino with oat milk. The woman at the table next to me glanced over with a kind smile. "Writing a memoir?" I looked up, smiled back. "No," I said, closing the laptop slowly. "I'm writing a warning." As I said the words, the wind picked up. A few loose pages lifted from my notebook and fluttered onto the cobblestone. I didn't chase them. Let them go. They were already written. They already belonged to the air now. Some people get fairy tale endings. I got something better. The truth. If there's one thing I've learned walking through the fire and out the other side, it's this. Silence may protect others, but it suffocates your own truth. For years, I played the part they cast me in. Dutiful, quiet, manageable. I believed love could be earned through sacrifice. I believed family would eventually see me. But what I know now is, peace comes not from being accepted, but from choosing yourself when no one else will. Maybe your story isn't as messy or dramatic as mine, or maybe it's even more tangled. But if you're still waiting for permission to speak up, consider this it. You do not need to stay in roles that no longer fit just to keep others comfortable. Whether you're 30 or 70, it is never too late to reclaim your story. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What part of this story hit home for you? Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own life? Or perhaps you've walked away from something that no longer honored your worth? Let me know in the comments. Type 1 if this story touched you, or tell me where you're watching from. I read every single message. And hey, if this wasn't your cup of tea, I'd still love to know why. Your feedback helps me grow too. If this video resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss the next story. We're just getting started, and your voice matters here. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and above all, stay true.